Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. A quick disclaimer before we begin. Certain words used within this podcast do not represent the views or opinions or beliefs of the participants involved. The words are used in historical context. Thank you very much and enjoy the episode. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Christian Reeve Podcast. Today's guest is the author of Lucky, a novel from Lucky, a novel. That is the full title. And she is all the way from Chicago, Illinois, in the United States. Her name is Kristina Parro. Welcome to the show, Kristina. How are you doing?
Thanks so much, Christian. I'm great. How are you?
Good. Obviously, off camera, we were having connectivity problems there. I've been having a lot lately, to be honest. It's very hit and miss, just in podcasting in general. It's, but we're here now.
I've been doing a lot of Instagram lives lately too, and I've been having some similar issues. Technology, pros and cons.
Yeah, I gotta say, ever since Instagram was acquired by Facebook, it's just been trashed the whole time. Just awful. It never used to have these problems before it was acquired. Same with WhatsApp, actually. It's a coincidence, I think not.
Yeah.
But Anyway, enough about that. Let's go straight to you. So, what can you tell us about your novel? What's it about? Like, I know, but in your words, please tell us what it's about.
For sure. So Lucky is inspired by Taylor Swift's album Folklore and the incredible true story of Standard Oil heiress Rebekah Harkness. So it depicts the intertangled web of stories. Part of the book, half of the book, is about a pop star named Rebekah Harkness, and the other half tells the story of Rebekah Harkness, starting from her grandfather, who was a Confederate soldier in the Civil War, and then all the way through the tragic demise of her children. And for those of you who don't know, Rebekah Harkness married into the Standard Oil family, which was Rockefeller's company, and a few years after she married into the family, her husband passed away and she inherited all of his money, and at one time was the richest American woman. And so she was able to live her life however she wanted. And she did. She sponsored Joffrey's original ballet. She was great friends and, sponsored a lot of the art of Salvador Dali. She just lived a fascinating life, and a life that a lot of people wish that they could live like. And I think that her story is just a beautiful picture because it ends in tragedy. And I think the opposite side of the coin for greatness oftentimes is tragedy. And so I was kind of exploring that in my novel, both with the story of Rebekah, and then I was also telling the story, like I said, of Rebekah Harkness, who is a pop star who kind of gets elevated to the peak of fame and fortune. And, she's at the top and she realizes that life isn't as good as she thought it would be up there. She thought that, if she was a good musician and got awards and, was selling millions of albums, more people would like her, and that her life would be better because of it. And she realizes that's not the case. So she uses Rebekah's story and little clues that Rebekah leaves behind, because Rebekah Harkness ends up buying a house that Rebekah Harkness lived in. And so she finds some clues that Rebekah left behind to help her answer some existential issues she has in her life.
That's awesome. Yeah, I got a lot of questions, but I suppose the main one I want to kind of go with, and it will sound really ignorant and obvious, but I think you'll know where I'm going with this. What was actually your kind of motivation for writing this book?
Yeah, so I was working in a nursing home during the pandemic, and I was just seeing a lot of tragedy in the world around me, and tragedy related to the collective idea of the American dream. And so as I was dealing with that, Taylor Swift's album came out, Folklore, in July, and I really dove into her lyrics to try to make sense of the chaos that I felt like I was surrounded by.
Right.
And so I was inspired by her song. Taylor has a song on the album about Rebekah Harkness called The Last Great American Dynasty.
That's the connection. There it is.
That's the connection. So I was interested in this character. There was a biography written about her right after she passed away that's really hard to get your hands on. I think you can buy it right now on Amazon for $999. I found it at a circulation-only library downtown Chicago, luckily. So I had access to this story that I knew a lot of people were interested in, but not many people had access to.
So that's legit. It was actually nearly $1,000 to buy.
Yes.
Why? What?
Because there was only one edition ever printed of it, and It's a rare book. And so when books are rare, supply and demand, the price ends up going crazy.
Yeah, and wouldn't it make sense to just make a digital version of the book and just sell the digital version?
I think that there's more to the story of the book than we know, because it exposes a lot of secrets of a very, very wealthy family and a very wealthy people. And my hypothesis is that there was some litigation or something that happened. I'm not really sure, but I know the author of the book was approached on Twitter about making a digital version of the book or just getting access to the book. And the author on Twitter said, I have one copy and it's not for sale.
I mean, yeah, that sounds like a book that's not supposed to be read. I mean, come on, man. What's the point? You know, it's like, don't push the red button. Do you know what I mean? Now everyone wants to push the button. Everyone wants to read the story. Like, yeah, that sounds off. And it's clearly like a cover up, but okay. I suppose something I really want to drive at is, obviously, the thing that I'm picking up here is a very kind of like inspiring book for women, obviously. The story is obviously very inspiring for women. Like, would you say that it's still as relevant? Like, I know how that question will sound, but there are like a lot of like female CEOs now emerging around the world. There's a lot of powerful women in the world now. I mean, you've got like the Prime Minister, I believe, of New Zealand is female. All of the Finnish government is female. So like slowly but surely, we're starting to see a bit more equal representation as far as like male and female representation across just society in general. So taking something like this, which once upon a time would have been quite a rarity, like something that, you know, maybe women would never even dream of, and now it's a sort of a possibility. Would you say it's like still kind of relevant? Do you think like women have more of a chance now than they did, let's say, well, when this book was written, or, you know, like, I know how this question sounds like a really dumb question,
I understand what you're saying. I think that we are at a time where women have more opportunities than ever before. I watched the Cinderella movie with Camila Cabello last night, and it was funny. It was a new take on Cinderella where Cinderella wanted to be a dressmaker and she wanted to work. And at the beginning of the movie, everybody was like, you know, no, you can't because you're a woman. And then at the end, she was able to. So were you going to say something?
Yeah, a couple of things. One, is that the one that has, I think it's on like Disney or something. It's got like James Corden in it.
Yes.
Yeah, see, I was really interested in that. Like, I saw the advert and I was like, oh, and like normally I wouldn't care about something like that, but I saw like the fairy godmother was like sort of like a gay black dude, and I was like, that's cool.
Yes.
That's fun. And then as soon as
Mhm.
I saw James Corden, I was like, oh no, I'm all right. I just like,
He's
no.
one of the mice. He's a small part.
But even though he's a small part, he somehow still manages to be, I'm not going to swear, really aggravatingly annoying. I just can't stand him. But anyway, yeah, cool. Okay, yeah. So with that particular adaptation, no, it's an interesting one. Because I mean that story's been done like a million times, but it still seemingly has legs on it.
I know.
And it's weird as well hearing something like that, like, oh, because it's so old-fashioned, like, oh, you're a woman, you can't do this. Like, I haven't heard that in years, but I have a lot of, for instance, have a lot of females in my community, predominantly female, and you know, occasionally they'll share stories of just like casual discrimination or harassment or all these different things, and it always kind of blows my mind that it still happens today. Do you know what I mean? Because years ago it used to be this sort of thing that's like, oh, it's just something that women have to put up with, you know, and like society was almost kind of like laughing at it, like, oh, it's just, you know, like, here's a really good example, right? Something really that seemingly years ago would have been like very passive, but now it's like stamped on. So like in the UK, it was always been pretty common, like if you're a female walking past a building site and there's like a group of guys there, they'll like wolf whistle or whatever. And years ago it used to be like, oh, it's just banter, it's lad banter, it's this, it's that. And then I don't know, I want to say somewhere in the mid 2010s or something like that, there's been this major shift. Maybe it was after Me Too, maybe that's when it kind of happened, but it did change. And now that kind of stuff is like destroyed. So it's really interesting to hear that it still happens to this day in workplaces and various other different places.
Yeah.
So I guess this leads me, go on.
I've never been like, well, at least not that I'm consciously aware of. I don't know of any time that I've been discriminated against for being a woman in my workplace or anything like that. But I think that just like racism, there are some subconscious cycles that we are still working through as a collective regarding, you know, truly seeing everyone on the same or an equal playing field, at least to like start, you know. But as far as my book goes, it's not really necessarily like a woman empowerment story. As far as the story of Rebekah Harkness or really Rhea, it more looks at the tragedy of wealth and the fact that for women and men, that wealth doesn't typically last more than 3 generations. And there's like just all of these stories of people throughout the ages from, I mean, the most ancient people that we know of how wealth on individual scales and larger scales gets squandered by the generations that come after the original people that acquire the wealth. And so that was more the direction that I was like kind of taking with it, because I was thinking about these things on a grander scale, as far as, like I said, the American dream, but how that relates to climate change, how that relates to, you know, our kids' future. Like the pursuit of limitless wealth cannot be a good thing for us all long term. And so working in for-profit healthcare, where I felt like I was kind of undervalued and like not, and even though I was the one who like got the advanced degrees, like I have my master's degree specifically for speech pathology. I'm a speech pathologist by background. Oh, wow. But yet so I found myself in a position where I just had really no room for improvement. I was making like 15% of what I made for my building every day. And I just had no, like my coworkers hadn't gotten a raise in like 5 years. And so I was like grappling with that idea, juxtaposed against a stock market that was rising to all-time highs despite us being in the middle of the pandemic, and despite, objectively no growth or little growth in our economy. And so I was just struggling with those ideas. And so while I think that, the women empowerment angle is cool, and that is definitely a part of my book, I suppose it wasn't necessarily in my motivations for writing it.
No, I get that. It's like a sub-product of it. I guess I was just more interested because, it's not common for just people in general to become the heir to like millions or billions or whatever. That's just not something that happens every day. And also, from a female perspective of, here's a good example. When Jeff Bezos got his divorce, obviously there was a lot of talk about what his wife was taken away from that, which was still a crazy amount of money. Like, I think if he's worth 100 billion, then she got like 2 billion, which was just crazy to think about. But these things happen, and it's like you said, like you use the word wealth, and that's a very important distinction as well, because obviously people always get that confused. Rich is, I have a lot of money in the bank account, I flash it, whatever, I go on nice holidays. But wealth is like more like power and influence, and I'm gonna buy this land or this island, or lobby and change these laws in this country, or whatever the case may be.
Or buy this newspaper, or buy this politician.
Yeah.
And then the power is even more substantial because these people have an impact on our day-to-day life in ways that we don't even think about.
Yeah,
I mean,
scary.
Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post.
Does he? I didn't know that. Okay.
Yes. And when there was a recent, I don't know how recent it was, but something about a billionaire tax, and the Washington Post put out an article about how the billionaire tax should not be a thing. Yeah, but if you don't know that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post, then that's like missing information that, is important to understanding the context of that news article.
Yeah, and also the fact that he owns Amazon, or did. So like,
right.
If he gets bad press, he can literally print good press about himself.
Not just about himself too, but about he can print negative press about his competitors.
Yeah, that's messed up. Yeah, but that is how the world works, to be fair. And
it has since. So my character Rebekah Harkness, she was already kind of in a wealthy family. Her father was a tycoon, a business tycoon in St. Louis during the Industrial Revolution, and he got together with some of his buddies and bought a paper. And I talk about this in my book, but back at that time there were, labor unions and strikes happening, and then they started these businesses started hiring, African American people to fill the spots that were previously not given to them because they were African American, but now because the white workers were striking. So then a news article went out about how Negroes were taking people's jobs, and that caused this massive race riot throughout the United States that is barely talked about. Like, I'd never heard about it before, and it was like the purge. Like, people, I've seen pictures and I've read firsthand accounts, but like people were dressed in street clothes, roaming the streets of predominantly Black neighborhoods, terrorizing people, burning their houses, throwing babies into burning houses in broad daylight. And it was kind of sparked by this news article, or various news articles that were happening at that time. And so it's like the impact is life or death sometimes.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. Do you think you're going to have like a follow-up to this book or anything, any other sort of future books, either in the works or planned? Cool. Tell. Please tell.
I'm working on one right now that is like kind of in the same universe as my first book. And my first book, it was difficult to write a fiction book about a real person, and my character of Rhea Harmonia was inspired by Taylor Swift as well as other pop stars and social media figures in this age, but it was difficult to kind of figure out like a contemporary fiction where I'm keeping true to some details, but it's not a true book. So anyway, I'm doing the same thing with my next book. There's going to be 5 points of view in this book, and one of the points of view is a character who's in Lucky, which is Abby. And Abby, you find out in Lucky, is an investor in GameStop. And so I have been following the GameStop situation since January, and I think that it helps paint a really interesting picture of our financial markets and some society issues. So my next book is going to be exploring the GameStop saga in a contemporary fiction form, and with multiple points of view.
What does your writing process or approach to writing a book actually look like?
I start with ideas, broad ideas, and write like essay type things about those ideas. And then as I'm writing those, I start getting other ideas for like the book and the characters. And so then I start writing those and then puzzle them together.
When you say essay type, so what you'll sort of pose yourself a question, answer the question, and then in that you'll sort of develop bigger ideas from that. Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah. And the great thing about that too is that it helps me understand, part of why I write is to help myself get a better hold of something that I am struggling with or that I'm trying to understand more fully, or come to terms with. And so that's exactly it. I have either a question or something that just is burning on my mind, and then I explore it further.
Yeah, so like your book, whenever you are thinking of writing a book, essentially what you're trying to do is answer all of those questions within that book, but you need to obviously answer them beforehand via doing these like sort of mini essay things, and then you sort of, once you've got enough to kind of work with a basic story or structure, then you take it to the next stage sort of thing.
Yes.
Cool. It's interesting. I like to ask different authors that, because I think the writing approach is always interesting. Everyone has a different style. And,
for sure. And everybody writes for different reasons, I never set out to be a writer or to write this book, really. It just kind of happened. I was working as a speech pathologist. I never considered myself a writer. I've always journaled, but I've never written anything really.
So I know I sort of briefly asked you about the motivation before, but was it more kind of like, I need to just put this out because I have some ideas on it? Because obviously that's a big transition, isn't it? You could have obviously just set up a blog about this or set up some sort of, like a book is a big commitment, and obviously you would have known that going into that. So where did that kind of shift happen where you were like, okay, I need to do this, I need to put this down? Like what was the reason for that?
I would say that was Taylor, finding out about the story of Rebekah Harkness, seeing the parallels between her and her life and the things that were going on in her life, and the parallels to some of the things that I was experiencing, and some of the things that we were experiencing as a collective. And then it just kind of happened. I originally thought about potentially writing a musical because I have a background in musical theater. But I have no background in writing music. So I just when I started writing. I don't know, it all came together so fast. I had been writing those essay type things though, before Taylor Swift's album came out in July of last year. And then I started writing this book in September.
But I guess what I want to know is like, were you kind of just writing the like essay things for fun, and then you kind of said, you know what, I want to turn this into something? Or because what you kind of said before was like, you know, you'd experimented with journaling, sorry, you'd done it a little bit. So it sounded like in the context of your overall life, it was like a small little hobby on the side. And then there's this transition where, as you said, you saw all these different things, you made all these different connections. You're like, okay, I want to do something with this. But I guess what I'm trying to probe at is like where that turns from kind of doing these like essay things to, okay, I'm going to write a book about this. Like, was that kind of just like, I need to put this out, I need to get this out there, I need to have my kind of opinion on this? Or was it like, this is my idea for a book and I want to become an author and this is going to be my first thing and then we're going to build from there? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, because obviously, as you spoke about before, you wanted to move away from healthcare, and we'll get to that a bit later. But now the shift is kind of like, well, I'm an author now. So I guess what I want to know, like, how did that decision kind of come up? Okay, I'm going to become an author.
Yeah. So I just found myself with a lot to say, but yet feeling increasingly not relatable with everybody around me. I felt like I felt like I was complaining about the same things over and over to my family, especially, but never being able to articulate what I wanted to say in the way that I wanted to say it. And so I think that that's what sparked my original essays. And then what led to the book is that, like, I wanted the people that I loved to read it because I wanted them to understand me a little bit more. And while I was working in the nursing home, I think that the word that best describes how I was feeling is undervalued, and undervalued in every, that ended up manifesting itself in other parts of my life as well. And I felt that my words really didn't have value anymore. And so I think that was more my motivation, was just to have my voice have value and to use my voice to change or maybe start to change some of the things that I see that are wrong about the world. And I think that being an author gives me a really interesting opportunity to do that, both through my writing and then through, my platform, and being able to come on to different podcasts and have different, Instagram lives with different authors or different experts, and just, put that value back in my voice.
Funny thing, actually. I was reading one of my favorite books the other day. It's called The Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov. And it's basically written around, I think, Russian Revolution time, as they sort of transitioned into early communism. And a lot of the books that Bulgakov wrote were just about his life, just about things, his experiences, thoughts, feelings, opinions. And the more and more I kind of read into authors behind books, the more I realized, like, it's just people. I think it's not common, or I don't know how common it is, that people sort of just wake up and go, I want to be an author. Like, that just happened. I think a lot of people just live a life, find they have some stuff to say that they feel compelled to put out into the world in some shape or form, and then writing a book is the natural kind of progression. Like, okay, well, I need to get this stuff out, this is how I'm going to do it. Obviously other people do it different mediums. Like I use Ricky Gervais as an example a lot of the time. Like, he turns his experiences into TV shows or whatever. I think it's a brilliant way to kind of take lessons you've learned from life and then convert them into stories with messages that people can kind of pick up on and relate to in some shape or form, and it's entertainment as well.
Right.
But yeah,
I mean, I think that stories are how we even make sense of our own life.
Yeah.
So I think that storytelling is a natural progression for humans as a species, because like even like just our thoughts are stories. If you really think about it, our memories are just the story that our brain is telling us of what happened at that time. But we all know that our memory is not, 100% accurate all the time, foolproof. And so that's just really interesting. I think that stories have so much power.
No, absolutely. I completely agree. That worries as well, because I remember, sometimes I remember things better than they actually happened, and I'll have a friend correct me like, oh, actually, it was more like this, and I'm like, it was. But most of those stories were drinking stories, so that's different. But you know how it
That'll
is.
get you.
I do have a couple more questions about your writing, but I just want to focus on something that you brought up a few times, because I think it's important in the overarching kind of story of you becoming an author. So obviously you mentioned that you're an essential healthcare worker. During the pandemic, you're working in a nursing home. I guess I want to know about your experiences. I want to kind of press on why you felt undervalued, because I do feel like there are a lot of similarities between the US and the UK health care systems. Obviously, they are very different, as we all know, but the UK's one is slowly but surely becoming more privatized. And obviously, it's very well known how the healthcare system in the US works. But from your perspective, being on the front lines, being within that, tell us your experiences.
Okay, so let me start by just kind of telling the story of me in the nursing home during the pandemic. And actually a little bit before too. Nursing homes, if you're familiar, are just kind of a sad place in general. But I was originally drawn to work there because I went to a medical specific grad school for speech pathology, and I found that I would make more money in a nursing home than in a hospital, to be perfectly honest. And so I decided to work in a nursing home. And I think that part of the reason that is the case is to draw people in. And I think that there's pretty high turnover in nursing homes because of that. And the benefits aren't really that great. And like I said, my coworkers hadn't gotten a raise in, I think, 5 years, which is just ridiculous. And then right before the pandemic, the government changed their reimbursement policies for therapy in a nursing home and inpatient rehab setting. And we just kind of got gypped on it. And so that I was already feeling undervalued. And then the pandemic started and my nursing home got hit with COVID. Honestly, I think in January, but it wasn't like official until February, March. But by the time lockdown started, over 90% of my patients had COVID. And it was really just a sad time for multiple reasons. First of all, the nursing home wasn't allowed to have visitors for obvious reasons, but visitors really help the staff and everyone make sure that people's needs are getting met.
Oh, that's
and
interesting.
So
yeah.
People's needs were often not getting met. And I'm the type of person who takes on people's problems and makes them my own. And so I found myself always, doing what I could to make sure that my patients were, having the best life that they could, making sure, so if they hadn't eaten or hadn't gotten changed, I was the one who would go talk to their CNA or write the report, or, even just FaceTiming people's families. At the beginning, the facility wasn't having any type of FaceTime or any type of communication for the families and the patients. And so in my sessions, like I would do FaceTimes with their families, and it turned out that like every single patient that I was doing that with passed away during that time. And then I would like have their families calling me after and like trying to get me to tell them information, or like it was just really crazy. So sad. I never got hazard pay. I didn't get sick time at baseline. My boss got COVID. They made her work from home. She was pregnant. They made her work from home. Otherwise, she would have had to take workers' comp and get like 60% of her pay. So I was doing more than ever. I was pouring my heart and soul into these patients, and just, I wasn't being valued for that. People didn't care at the end of the day. Like, that is not their first priority. The money from the government or the patient's families or whatever is. And so like that just really was hard for me to wrap my head around, because like I kind of lived my life up until this past year thinking that like it was the good thing for me to do to help people. I was doing the right thing. Like, but then I saw no one else around me doing what I thought was the right thing. And like, just kind of like getting, I don't know, they were having a better life and a better situation than I was in. And I was looking at my friends around me who were then working from home when I had to continue to go into work every day. And they were getting, stipends from their company for work at home stuff, or they were getting bonuses. And I'm like, what's a bonus? We haven't had a raise in 5 years.
So, see, this is interesting because there's a lot of, again, I mentioned this before, there's a lot of similarities between our nations as far as this is concerned. Obviously, we do have a public healthcare system, the NHS, but at the same time, when it comes to things like care homes and the NHS, I do remember that there was a brief pay rise, maybe, I want to say 4, 5, 6 months into the pandemic. But as I recall, it was a substantial pay rise for doctors, but not for nurses. And of course, everyone, even to this day, have been working like crazy hours trying to keep up and stuff.
Well, and the funny thing is like the nurses and the CNAs and the therapists are the ones who are actually spending the time with the patients, like actually having to give the patients direct care. When
Exactly.
The doctors, like they have, of course, the schooling and, they are paid the big bucks for a reason, but they're not spending the same time with the patients that other professions in the healthcare field are. And it's funny that they're always the ones that end up getting the raises and the special parking spots and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, it's the same story in the UK. I mean, Jesus, even the UK Parliament, we have Conservatives in at the moment, and they're very famous for kind of always taxing very high, cutting benefits, that kind of stuff. But obviously it hits a lot harder right now during a pandemic that they're doing these sorts of things, because we're not out of it. I mean, things might be back to normal. I know in the States, you're pretty much back to normal. And in the UK, we kind of are, because we sort of follow your template and vice versa, you follow ours. But I don't know that that's necessarily the right idea. Like, I was stunned when I started seeing that in the States. Like, I remember there was like a smaller version of the Super Bowl. Like, instead of having 100,000, it was like 60,000. I still couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then obviously, I mentioned before, I'm a wrestling fan. Wrestling was really hit hard, just the same as sports without fans. But when the fans came back, I was still thinking, like, I don't know. I feel like this is too early. I know everyone's vaccinated, but do you know what? People still get the virus with or without COVID. I mean, I go out of my house every day and I just kind of take the risk. I don't go out often. I try and limit the amount of times I go out and stuff, but like, I kind of just go along with whatever the current advice is and just work with that. So like when I do my volunteer work, for instance, like we just wear masks the whole time. But then like if I go to the store, maybe I don't wear it, but I don't know, it's very iffy here because like the government have kind of said like, we'll review this, and like right now, as of recording this, it's now we're in September, and they're talking about there maybe will be another lockdown in October. I don't think there will be, but it could happen, and our government at least is very kind of, they do, it's really obvious what they do. It's like, if there's news that something is going to happen, it probably will happen, but they'll keep telling you like, no, we're going to review it this time, we're going to review it this time. And then they'll do everything that everyone was worried about, but they just won't tell you that, you know. And I understand it's to not like freak people out and worry people, but it's like, I don't know. It's just like, I had a really bad feeling that we might re-enter a lockdown because last year, and okay, fair enough, we didn't have the vaccine last year, so that's a different factor. But last year it was like we locked down too late. Right. It was like end of March or something when they decided to put us into lockdown. And by summertime of last year, we were all but back to normal, as well, at least in the sense that, like, you know, pubs and well, not clubs, but pubs and outdoor spaces and all these things were open again, and people were fraternizing and going out and everything, which is fine because obviously the government told them that that was okay to do that. And there was even a scheme in place, I think it was like 50% off dining or whatever, to encourage people to go out and do these things. And then obviously the cases rose, and then they just sent us back into lockdown and blamed the public for that, even though they told us to do that. And I kind of feel like the same thing might happen again this year. I'm trying to be optimistic, that's the word. But it's hard to know, you know, and especially in the States. I mean, it's even crazier because, you know, you're essentially like 51 countries in one space. Do you know what I mean? Like everywhere operates differently. So obviously you're in Chicago, but like Texas or New York are like operating in a different way. Maybe they're similar, maybe not. You know, people I've had on the podcast, for instance, from places like Alabama, pretty much just didn't even acknowledge that there was a pandemic going on. They just did their thing. And then there was other states where they were really strict. So it's interesting, you know. And just going back to the point about where the government kind of, like, they do things to help people, but like the people on the front lines always have a very different kind of perspective. Do you know what I mean? Like there was a lot of like support initially coming from our government for the NHS and things like that, frontline workers. But when you look at like the baseline of what that actually means, like, you know, people maybe getting pay rise, stuff like that, it didn't really happen. But yet the government was happy to give themselves pay rises. So
right. Yeah, just like our Congress, who right in the thick of the pandemic last year took a month-long vacation. Cool, guys. Thanks.
In fairness, though, that was Trump's government. So
yeah. Well, I think that part of that's so true. I think part of and I think that part of the reason that you see, you know, the people in the more southern states not take it as seriously is because, you know, those states were bigger Trump supporters, and Trump's response to the pandemic was subpar at best. But I think that part of the problem with all of this is how it has been so politicized, and people look at wearing masks as a political statement in a way. And it's just like, that's not what it is.
I will say this, as like, I'm not really a political guy, but any government, regardless of affiliation, right, would struggle with a pandemic, you know, like, because we have Labour and Conservative here, which is basically Labour, I guess, is like Democrats, and then Conservatives is like Republicans, sort of, not quite, but sort of. Okay. And on that basis, it's like, it wouldn't matter. Like if the Democrats had been in America, there would have been similar problems. Maybe certain things would have been dealt with differently, but it would have been similar problems, you know. And same here. I'm convinced if Labour were in, same problems. Because at the end of the day, you still just have a group of people who are trying to decide what the best things are to do, and they have sort of like delayed medical and scientific advice being given to them, which they're unsure about. Like the impression that I get here in the UK is that they were just unsure what to do.
Yeah.
Like they
And
had
I
all
mean,
this information and it was conflicting with each other.
yeah, and it was a novel virus, right?
Mm.
So, most of the things that we have vaccines for, that we have treatments for, you need, evidence-based research to back your decisions up. And we just didn't have that at the beginning of the pandemic, which definitely, like you said, led to the paralysis almost. And I think the delay in lockdowns. I think that the thing that would have really helped us the most is if we would have locked down right away and, would have just like gotten it over with, and like everybody would have gotten on board. But on the other side of that is shutting down the economy, which has a ton of seriously negative consequences, which also need to be taken into account. So our politicians really were put in between a rock and a hard place.
And this is why I'm kind of fair to them on that basis. Like, for instance, while I do think we are out of this a bit too early, I mean, you couldn't keep it. Yeah, you couldn't keep going, especially America. I don't know about the UK. I think we would. Yeah, I mean, we would suffer, but the US definitely couldn't survive another year of being locked down. That would just be it. Like you gotta. But here's the thing. Like, I think with certain things, certain measures could have been put in place, certain things could have been done. Like, I still think, for instance, sporting events could have been done at like quarter or half capacity for a bit longer before they went full blast with it. Because I feel like with a lot of these decisions, it's like 0 to 60. Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, okay, we're just going to change it up now. Like, if you look around in the UK now, it's no longer law that you have to wear the mask. It's more like encouraged, but like no one does. And why would you? To be fair, if you walk outside and no one's wearing a mask, you're probably not going to wear them. And I'd say maybe 2% of people I see outside are wearing them. Like even me, I've been very cautious since the very beginning, but even I don't wear it really that much anymore, other than the volunteering work I do. But that's more because I go into like people's homes a lot of the time. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, we're dealing with people from different ages, so it makes sense to be more careful in that sense and protect.
Yeah, what do you do for your volunteering work?
It's a mixture of things. So sometimes it's on base, helping, give food parcels or like food to the homeless, that kind of stuff, answering calls. They have like a charity shop as well. But the main stuff I tend to do is like we deliver furniture, so like people that have recently been homeless and now have a place to live, or people in poor income families, and we also collect donations from places and give it back to the charity kind of thing. So obviously, like, I've been doing this since October last year, nearly a year, and especially like in the height of the pandemic last year, it was really important to wear the mask. But I still wear it, like, even when I do it now, I still will wear the mask when I go into people's homes and stuff. But I very much kind of go on the basis of whatever what the vibe is, what the story. But then I've been out since then, like out in the city, and no one wears a mask. And at the very first time, I was really anxious about that. I was like, I don't know if this is a good idea. But then I kind of thought, in a way, it's pointless for me to wear a mask if everyone is not wearing a mask, if you see what I'm saying. Yeah.
I mean, I think that it still might protect you, but a little bit, but it's still so unknown. And like, I think, it's hard. It's really hard. Mm-hmm. But in Chicago right now, we do have a mask mandate. So we have to wear masks. Yeah.
Interesting.
In any public place. We don't have to wear them outside, but in a grocery store or, Starbucks or whatever, you do.
See, this is interesting because as of, again, this podcast happening, I think a couple of days ago, a couple of wrestling events happened in Chicago. AEW's All Out event happened there in the Sears Center, I think, or one of the main I'm going to kill myself for not remembering this. One of the main stadiums, arenas in Chicago. It's a big capacity theater, but no one was wearing masks in the audience. So it's interesting that maybe it's like different regions in the state. I don't know.
And it's a mandate, but it's like not like legally enforced. It's not like police are going around and like arresting people who aren't wearing masks.
But that's key though, because like your wording is so important. A mandate, I kind of thought that meant typically like mandatory, like you have to. But as you say, if it's not being policed, I mean, even during the height of the pandemic last year, people were still not wearing it, and I never saw anyone get in trouble for not wearing a mask ever.
Right.
Never. Like
if anything, someone would just ask you to put one on.
Yeah, and that would be the end of it, really.
Yeah. Well, if you complied, I guess. I think I have seen like some crazy videos of like people getting tackled. I don't know.
It's crazy when you think about it, isn't it? Like people. It is. Some people talk about it like as far as I do understand people getting annoyed like having to wear them, but at the same time, if someone just asks you to put a cloth around your face for like a little bit of time, do you know, even if that goes against what you believe in, like it's not really a big deal. Like what imagine if like I turn around and said like, oh no, you have to wear a space helmet. Like that's much more intrusive. That's much more of an issue. A mask is not really, if anything, do you know, it's funny, a lot of the people I've spoken to actually like the masks because it's like it grants anonymity. You can silently judge people without them knowing. You can just, I don't know, do all manner of weird stuff that people can't see with your mouth. I don't know.
So true.
So it's funny.
Masks have pros, definitely, but one of the major cons is the mask acne. When I was working in the nursing home and had to wear my mask every day, I would get so many pimples and like my skin was just terrible. But you gotta make sure, little fun tip for anyone who has to wear their mask at work all day or whatever, make sure after you eat lunch, you brush your teeth or use mouthwash, because your mouth has a lot of bacteria in it. And when you're breathing like in and out of a mask and your mouth has bacteria, that bacteria is getting trapped behind the mask and it's either going back inside of you or it ends up as pimples on your face.
That makes sense.
I've
learned something new today. Okay.
There you go.
Right on. I'll remember that for next time. I probably still won't do it, but at least I'll know now.
Yeah, right.
The main thing I have is the problem with the strings on the ears, so it just aches. Like I had it the other day. I had to wear a mask all day indoors, and obviously you change them every once in a while, and change your gloves every once in a while. But yeah, it's really painful. I had like an aching sensation that lasted at least 2 or 3 hours afterwards.
Oof.
So, yeah.
Well, you'll have to send me your address after we're done with this, because I have some masks that I got made for my book, and they have adjustable ear straps, and they're like the most comfortable masks ever. So I'll send you a couple.
Cool. Right on. I like that's the one thing I like about the masks is like customizable. Like people saw it as an opportunity, like a marketing opportunity, and
yes.
It's like of course they do.
Why not? Word of mouth advertising.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, actually. Like literally. Yeah.
Literally.
So you mentioned that you're a speech language pathologist. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that job and what it entails?
Sure. So I still technically am a speech language pathologist. I'm not working in the field right now.
You freelance or freelancing?
Yeah, I do have, in our field, we call it PRN. So registry or as needed. I have a part-time job that I help out at once in a while just to keep my skills fresh, because it is, a licensure. Like I had to get licensed. I had to go through a fellowship year in order to do it. So like, I don't want to lose the opportunity that I like to work if I would want to in the future. But speech language pathology, most people know about it as far as kids in schools with lisps or other speech impediments. But I was working on the medical side of speech pathology. So the areas that I would work on patients with was cognition, so memory, attention, executive functioning, speech and language, so the actual articulation of the speech or the language part of speech, which happens in your brain. And then we also worked with swallowing disorders. So anyone who was having difficulties swallowing, our breathing tube and our food tube are like right next to each other in our throat. And so especially if somebody has some kind of, brain damage, neurological disease, any kind of weakness, things can go wrong. And so we would modify people's diets. We would do swallowing exercises with them, just rehabilitate the swallowing muscles to get them back to eating regular foods.
So on a slightly related note, I don't know if this will sound funny, but just bear with me. When I was like 4 years old, it's quite funny. I like accidentally choked on something. I don't know what it was. I think it might have been a hot dog sausage or something. But from that point onwards, I had like a problem swallowing certain things. So like pills, even to this day, I'm a wuss when it comes to taking pills. I have to like take a massive swig of water, even if it's a tiny pill. I have to be like like that. And also, I couldn't eat normal sausages. So not hot dog sausages, but normal sausages. It would make me feel sick. Like I'd smell them, I'd feel sick. And then somewhere around 11, 12 years old, that sensation just went away. Just no, I still get the thing where I'm a bit funny about taking pills, but I just do it. But that thing with the sausages went away. So, and I always wondered like if that was just an irrational fear or if there was some more serious problem there or something like that. I don't know.
My guess is that was like a psychological thing that like maybe. You're kind of traumatized from
yeah, maybe
almost to death. And because like there's no physiological reason that I can think of that an event when you were 4 would cause like nausea and problems until you were older, unless you had some kind of actual damage in your throat. But I think that you would have difficulties eating other things too, not just one specific thing.
Right, yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing, by the way.
You're welcome.
So we'll bring it back to your writing, because I found this interesting. You actually published your book under your own publishing company.
I did.
So I just wanted to ask, like, what steps did you take to actually create this company? What does it require? And also why you decided to do that as opposed to just going for a regular publisher?
For sure. So let's start with the why. And it has to do partially with the fact that I was feeling undervalued in my job. And part of the reason I was feeling undervalued was because there was a middleman who was, sucking a part of my profits, but doing nothing, in my opinion. And so for my book, like I had the cover very, very early on in the process. I already, like, I had my editors, like I had everything lined up for myself. And so I kind of looked at it as a similar situation, like that a publishing company would have just been a middleman for me, because surprisingly, they don't really do that much. They get your book printed and they distribute it. But like a lot of the advertising, they don't have big advertising budgets for each book. They don't have, or for each author. So like that often falls on the author themselves to do, and usually with the advance that they had been given. So at the beginning of the pandemic, I got really interested in the stock market. Before that too, but I was really, really into it at the beginning of the stock market, at the beginning of the pandemic. And so I made some money, and that's how I was able to, ultimately quit my job. But I just kind of looked at this as an investment in myself. And so I just wanted to do it myself, and I wanted to have the control, and I wanted to just say that I did it. So I incorporated a company, an LLC, and then I actually printed my books are on Amazon, and that's like Amazon will print on demand paperback books, which is really cool. So like if somebody goes to buy my
I lost you.
Sorry.
No.
No. If somebody goes to buy my book, Amazon will just print it like on demand, which is great because I don't have to like, put up front any money for that. But I did get hardcover books printed, and I got 1,000 hardcover books printed, and I had to like, front the cost for that.
Right. So that's how you get, if you suddenly get like a massive demand, like let's say your book takes off like next month and you suddenly just get like 10,000 orders, like that's how you'll deal with it. You just have to front up a certain amount of cost, and Amazon deals with the kind of, they're essentially the middle,man in a sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
They definitely are the middleman. It's like, honestly, it is kind of the same thing. I'll be exploring other options for my next book too, just because they do take quite, like, I make a very, very small amount of money per book.
Okay.
So I don't know. The convenience is a definite pro of going through Amazon, and not having to deal with like, the like shipping out the books, like housing the books, like storing the books, you know what I mean? But they are definitely still a middleman.
Okay, so you're looking eventually to distance yourself from them as well and be able to get like a better sort of deal for yourself, kind of thing.
Yeah, I would love for this just to be like, my thing. And that's what I was looking for, really, because I just found myself, despite, like I said, despite having gotten advanced degrees, despite having spent my 4 years at undergrad, 2 years getting my master's, like I found myself very stuck. And I looked at the other options for me in my field and other fields, and like I really didn't see any place where I wouldn't be stuck unless I was working for myself and doing my own thing. And so that was really what motivated me to start my own publishing company.
Awesome. No, I think it's a sensible thing to do. I just think it's a tricky one because obviously, much in the same as the music industry, when you are working with publishing companies, you do have the machine behind you as far as like distribution is concerned. But I hear more and more like in the music industry that people, artists are opting to get distribution deals as opposed to label deals, so that they have full control and ownership and such, and the only thing they have to front up is money to get it distributed. So if a similar thing is possible in the book industry, then that's obviously more preferable because you retain more of your own money. So
right.
Best of luck with that.
Thank you so much. It's been fun and it's been really empowering.
Awesome. On your website, you state that a word you'd use to describe the impact you intend to make on the world is transformative, and you aim to achieve this via your storytelling ability. So tell us more about your sort of philosophy of life and storytelling.
Philosophy is my favorite part of life. I've really, really delved into philosophy this year. But like looking back at my life, I think that it can be categorized as transformative in almost every year. I feel like I'm constantly changing, learning and growing. And I think that a strength of mine is that I'm open to learning new things, extremely open to learning new things. Like I love to learn. And I think that that's how we grow and transform, is through learning. And so while I write my books, and like while I wrote Lucky, for example, I'm a completely different person than I was when I started writing that book. And I think that at least some of that, it has been captured in my book. And hopefully, that I look at it kind of like the butterfly effect, where one small change can, spark consequences that you never would have expected. But I look at it as like one small change in myself can hopefully spark more collective change through reading my books and reading my writing.
I totally agree with you. It's not something you originally think about, I think, when you create art, because I as well, I mean, I'm gonna call myself a writer. I do occasional poetry and stuff, but the things that I'm more into are writing music, podcasting, acting, all these sort of endeavors. And I'm sort of building an online following, right? And some of that following listens to this podcast as well. So hello.
Hey guys.
But some of them have been telling me, they've been a bit more vocal lately. They've been saying how like they've been inspired by what I do to do their own things, or that it gave them like a positive kind of outlook on things, which inspired them to do something. Or, they were just having a bad day and that turned it into at least a good ending for a bad day or something like that. And I guess my point is that like you don't really think about that impact until you start seeing it. Much the same as like when I do my volunteer work, I just do that because I want to help people, and I love to do it. But every now and again something will happen, or someone will thank you. Like I'll give you a really good example. Like it was close to Christmas, and I was working with this driver, and this particular driver had a bad attitude, which was weird because everyone else at this place I do volunteering at is awesome, but this particular person wasn't. And I was like, wow, I'm the professional one here. Like, this is odd. Because the thing is, what I normally do is I sort of tag along and help and everything. And I take it very seriously, but essentially I am a helper in that situation. But they were sort of pushing the responsibility onto me, and I was like, okay. But the scenario was that we were delivering furniture to this person's house. And the first thing I noticed straight away was that outside the house, occasionally in the UK, you have like these like bars on the outside of the door. I think it's more for like when people are disabled or they're elderly and they just need something to pull themselves in, something to hold on to while they're, I don't know, grabbing their keys or whatever the case may be, to assist people essentially. And I was like, oh, okay. And I was thinking, And basically the driver's complaining because it's like, oh, no, I'm not going to wait. I've got other things to do. We're busy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking like, Jesus, we've been here like a minute. Like, let's just, I was like, what if they're elderly? Like maybe because basically we always call them before to like let them know like, oh, hey, we're outside. Can we come in? Blah, blah, blah. And he was just really kind of in a bad mood, just not being very professional. And I was like, I said like, we're going to wait. I was just assuming control of the situation, even though I'm not in control. I'm like, we're going to wait. Let's call them. Let's wait. So he speaks to them on the phone, and they're running late. It's a mother. She's running late. Okay. And I just had a feeling about this situation. In more recent years, I just tend to rely on my feelings, and they sort of always steer me in the right direction. And I thought, they're going to come here, and even though we've sort of put all of the stuff outside the house at this point, he wanted to basically drive off and leave it. And I would just felt bad because it's one thing if you just leave a table, but we'd left like basically enough furniture to, well, fill a house. So I was like, come on, this is ridiculous. And I just had a feeling that was wrong.
Sorry.
No worries. I had a feeling like it was wrong, like, we should wait. And wouldn't you know, this mother eventually came 5-10 minutes later, and she looks stressed as hell. And she's got 2 kids, one of whom is a bit elderly, one is younger, but she just looks stressed. And I just saw, because my mum was a single parent, and I don't know that she was a single parent, but she just had that look in her eyes, the same look that my mum had on some days when she was really stressed with me, just trying to live and make things happen. And she was, her mind was all over the place. She's just clearly like got a million things going on in her head. And my colleague eventually did assume control of the situation and started like communicating with her. And then she just asked us, oh, hey, would you mind also moving this thing for me downstairs, upstairs, and it was like really difficult to get up there and stuff. Like it was hard work, but you know, that's what we're there for. And I was like, yeah, sure, like no problem. And I lifted it, and it was like, didn't weigh anything either, but it was awkward. You could tell on our own that would be a problem. And so we just lifted it up there. It took maybe like a minute or two. And then I was not expecting this. I was ready to just be like, hey, yeah, thank you very much. You know, have a good Christmas, all that. But she literally said like, oh my God, thank you so much. Like, this means so much. Like, you could tell like she just wanted to like cry, but she was like holding back tears, like, because that was like, that meant a lot. And clearly like there's a lot of stuff going on, but you don't want to like unload to a stranger. But at the same time, it's like, oh my God, thank you so much. And I was like, yeah, no worries. Have a good Christmas. And stuff like that is why, well, A, I think people should do volunteering. And B, just when you see that impact that you have on other people, it just spurs you on to keep creating, keep doing good things, positive things in life to help people, keep trying to put positivity out into the world and kind of impact the world in a positive way and make people feel better and, you know, make the world a better place little by little.
Yeah. And I think what's so amazing about this kind of thing is that, like, you never know exactly how or what you're doing that makes the change. And so that just speaks to the importance of, like, you know, you need to be living your best life. You need to be, you know, balanced and have a philosophy, have a why. You have to have all of these things. Through volunteering and through writing, you can find those things if you don't already know them. But I really think, again, it's the change inside of you that then spreads into the world around you. And that is just like such a powerful thing. Jordan Peterson is one of my like favorite intellectuals to listen to. And I think it was him who said, like, you can't change a city unless you change yourself or something. And so one of his big things is like, you know, every day you wake up, you make your bed. Like that starts your day off on a good note where you've accomplished something. And then that already puts you in a good state of mind for all of your interactions during that day.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, sometimes like I'm a very tidy person anyway, but like every now and again, inevitably when you're working, you know, your room gets messy, your space gets messy. And every now and again, I'll just have a day where I just clean stuff up, do the hoovering, washing, all this stuff, you know. And it's funny how like once you're done, you just breathe and you just feel better. You feel like refreshed, like you've hit the reset button. You're like, you know, and it's good. Yes. You need that. But like, some days are just, you know, the best thing you did was you woke up and you got yourself out of bed, and that is an achievement in of itself.
And that's okay, right? And like on the flip side of that too, like if you are filled with negativity, if you're filled with insecurity, if you're filled with, you know, criticisms for people around you, I think that ends up manifesting in the world around you too. So this is like really of the utmost importance, because every day, whether you realize it or not, you're changing the world around you. And so that's why it's all that much more important to make sure that you are, you know, in the person you want to be.
I am. All right. My next question seems a bit silly now. What are the best and worst things about Chicago?
Okay, best and worst things about Chicago. Best, well, let's start with worst. Parking. I have gotten so many parking tickets in Chicago that my parents joked that when I moved to like my own apartment that I needed to have a budget item for parking tickets because I would get them legitimately every month.
Wow.
It was brutal. And it's just driving and parking kind of sucks. But the best thing about Chicago is being by the lake. And I love being around water. It really is balancing for me. It's inspirational for me. And the fact that I'm in a volleyball league and it's right on the beach.
Oh,
and
cool.
The skyline is in like right there in the background. It's so beautiful. And every time I go, I'm just like, man, could I be any luckier? So.
Are you originally from Chicago?
From the suburbs of Chicago. And
so
then I moved to Indianapolis in Indiana for college. I went to Butler University, and then I moved back to Chicago, to the actual city, for grad school, and then I decided to continue to live here.
No, it's refreshing to hear someone that like loves where they're originally from, because you don't always get that. I don't know, like I grew up in London. I now live in Manchester. For those who don't know, it's sort of in the middle of England, and everyone is always like, "Oh, you were born in London? Oh, that must have been great." And it's like, no, not really. It was fun when I was a teenager. That was about it. But the reality is, like, it does really depend. I think if you spend time away from home, that's a big thing. Like I missed. Like I lived in Europe for 3 years, and I came back, funnily enough, as the pandemic hit, and but I still didn't want to stay in London. I wanted to go somewhere else. But I did miss the UK, that familiarity. And it's like they say, isn't it? Absence makes the heart grow fonder. But it's cool to hear that you dig Chicago. I hear a lot of good things about Chicago, actually.
It's awesome. I mean, the food is also great. You should really come visit.
I would love to. If I had, oh my God, it would definitely be on my list of places to go. I'd love to see professional wrestling there, because for professional wrestling, Chicago is known as one of the best towns, certainly in America, places in America to see wrestling. But yeah, anyway.
It's so funny because like I didn't even know that, to be perfectly honest.
It's huge. I'm surprised that there's a wrestler actually from Chicago, isn't it? His name's CM Punk. And he's like big in the wrestling world. He's also like a massive hockey fan, and he's like such a big deal in Chicago that like like even at hockey games, like when they've won like the World Series or whatever, like he's like there prominently, and it's like, yeah, we won this together. And it's like he's like from a totally different industry, but yeah, no, it's cool. It seems like it's a very passionate place, and that certainly comes across in sporting events and entertainment and stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, no matter what sport you like, Chicago's a great city for you because we have it all. Well, just about.
What's the biggest life lesson that you've learned so far?
That's a great question. I would say that life is beautiful and it's also tragic. And the most important thing to think about is balance. And if you find balance in your life, then you are on the path towards a fulfilling life at the very least. And, you know, happiness shouldn't be what we're aiming for, because there's another side to happiness. There's like, you don't know happiness unless you also know sadness. And so those things should be appreciated. Both of those emotions, in my opinion, should be appreciated, but balance is the key.
Thanks for sharing. As we draw things to a close, do you have any upcoming projects or some final thoughts that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, you can follow me on Instagram because I am always doing some interviews with different authors. I try to get topics that can be universal to everyone. Yesterday, I talked to a woman named Leah Grimaldi about forgiveness, and she took me through the Reiki healing method for forgiveness, which was really interesting. I talked to another author last week about manifestation and the law of attraction. So we've been exploring a lot of interesting topics on my IG. So give me a follow there. I'm Kristina Parro Writes. It's Kristina with a K. Maybe Christian can put this in his like little bio about the podcast. But other than that, just you should read my book. I think that it's a book that, while it is about women, I think that it's a book that universally can be universally applicable. And I think that, I hope that my lessons learned throughout the year, this like year of chaos and year of trauma, year and a half during the pandemic, I think that I have packaged some of those life lessons up into Lucky. And so I would just highly recommend it.
Well, excellent. Thank you so much for being on the show and sharing everything with us. And all the best.
Thank you, Christian. Have a great one.
And to everyone listening to the Christian Reeve podcast, be safe, be well, and I'll see you in the next one.